Finally, it's meant to be a woman. My guest today is Heather Boersma, and she's a speaker, author, and life coach. And the reason I have her on today is because she specializes in helping people overcome anxiety. And that's how I stumbled upon you, Heather. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited you're here, especially during this time. This interview is taking place during the COVID-19 outbreak, and just a little background for myself. I used to experience high levels of anxiety around the ages of 18 and 19. My anxiety kind of eventually turned into more of a depression, anxious kind of thing. I was able to get help for it. It turned out that it's a lot of the guidelines that you teach. But what was crazy was after we spoke the other day, the outbreak started happening, and I went to one of the grocery stores, and it was just mayhem. I could feel all of that starting to come up again, and I had to, step back, refocus, reevaluate, and then go back into the steps, slowing everything down, getting clear. And so anyways, it just made me all the more excited to meet with you and just go through kind of like the steps. So let's start with your backstory on what brought you to, teaching about overcoming anxiety.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, I went through watching a really close family member die of cancer, as well as having genetic testing done because my mom and her family carry the breast cancer gene. So I had the testing done and found out shortly after my family member passed away that I did have this genetic mutation. And so I started unconsciously telling myself this story that I was going to get cancer and die, and that my kids weren't going to have a mom, and that I wasn't going to live this full, beautiful life that I had imagined that I would live. And that train of thought created this intense anxiety and panic. So for about a year, I had panic attacks. The first one was on an airplane coming home from a conference that I was speaking at. And not only did I have anxiety, but I had a lot of shame over the anxiety that I was experiencing, which just multiplied it really. And I've since learned how resisting those difficult emotions only just makes them so much worse. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that really kind of started my journey of like knowing that this was not the way God wanted me to have to live, like to not just have to cope, but to really go after total and complete healing of it. And so it started me down this road of emotional and mental health and learning not just getting an instant healing, but really learning a process to be able to teach and give to other people who are also struggling.
I'm really big on the stories that I bring are always women who have gone through something. And so many of them are taking their experiences of what they went through, learning how to, deal with it or learning how to manage it, and then getting to that other side where they're now helping other people. And so I'm really, it's painful that you had to go through that, but I'm so glad that you're taking that and now you're helping other people with it, especially during this time, which everybody's talking about anxiety. So when somebody comes to you and they say, Heather, I am really struggling with uncertainty and anxiety and all these feelings and these emotions. And what would be something that you kind of walk through a step one with them?
So the first thing that I do is I really try to help them understand the way that we work, and that anxiety is not our enemy. And so often we're told like fear is a liar and anxiety is an enemy, and it makes you feel like this shame, right? Like there's something wrong with me, like I've somehow let the devil in or something. Like it's over spiritualized in a way, I think, that's not helpful, because anxiety is not our enemy. Anxiety is just an indicator. I think of it like a light on the dashboard of the car of my life, and it's just saying pay attention, like something's going on here. And what I now know that I didn't know then is that every single emotion that we experience comes from a thought that we're having. And so if we can identify the thought that is creating the anxiety, then we can become aware of it and start to shift it towards a thought that will actually serve us better. And I'm not talking about like, well, I call it like a -10 +10 thought. Like, I'm not talking about going from this like absolute lie that's like your -10 thought to like the most beautiful cliche wrapped up in a bow truth that's like a +10 thought, because most of our brains can't jump there and we just won't believe it. And if we don't believe it, like even a little bit, then it won't change us. So I help a lot of women identify what's the thought creating the anxiety, and then shifting towards a thought that will serve them better. And I try to help my clients get to neutral first. So like, what's just a neutral thought that you could believe about your anxiety? For example, instead of thinking, I'm going to get cancer and die, just actually outlining the facts. Like, the facts are, I watched this family member die from a cancer that it's not the kind I have. And the fact is, my mom had breast cancer, but she didn't die from it. And the fact is, her sisters also have this gene and they all have not even had cancer and have taken steps. So like, helping get me to a place of neutral before moving on to like, I won't get cancer and die and everything will be wonderful. Yeah. So that would be the first step, I think.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of testimonials or women kind of speak about the process and how you've helped them. One thing was flying anxiety. That was like a specific one that I saw come up a couple of times. And as I spoke to you earlier, I mean, I still have anxiety flying. I love that you just mentioned the shame that comes with it, because I definitely I felt embarrassed and shameful that I had to, I turned to medication to fly it. In the beginning, I was very shameful about that because I felt like I can't control my mind. And I just felt like, because I was like at the time, more spiritual or religious based mindset, and I still had shame and things. It was very hard for me to admit it. In time, like, I've now released all of, the prerequisites and all of the expectations of myself. And I've realized, okay, well, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I don't carry any shame anymore with it. But I feel like that's a huge part of it as well, just women. And that's even the same with depression. And I feel like the two go hand in hand, just not for everybody. I'm just saying from my experience, mine started as anxiety. Some women that I know, it started with anxiety, and then it led into a little like it was almost like stages, and so I love when you start talking about understanding the story that you have in your mind and shifting the story. That was bang on. As soon as I figured out what that story was and I made a shift, I was able to completely manage and release, a lot of that depression. And like, it went lower and lower and lower in severity. And now I have a good a grasp on that. But like, taking that time to just know what your story is. So I love that is your step one, and bringing them to that neutral is probably already so beneficial. Just bringing them to neutral, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you say all anxiety is the same across the board, or do you have different, different programs for different kind of targeted anxiety?
Well, I would say that I deal with it all from the same framework, which is, so the framework that I work from is that we can separate out the things of our life into 5 categories. So there's our circumstances. So that would be turbulence in a flight. And then there's our thought, which is, oh, this flight's going down, or something terrible is going to happen, or I'm going to get hurt. Or then there's a feeling that comes from that thought. So that creates this feeling of anxiety or fear. And then out of our feelings, we act. And so we do whatever it is that we do when we're feeling anxious, and then we get a result, and the result actually comes from our action. So if I was coaching someone when I coach people through flying anxiety, for example, we talk about how our brain wants to find a repeated pattern because it's efficient, and our brain is always looking to be efficient. And so it makes total sense that when we have experienced turbulence on a flight and it created this fear, that the next time we feel the turbulence, it triggers the same thought pattern, because our brain is like, let's just do what we already know here. So to actually change that default setting is where the work is. And it takes 63 days for us to create a new neural pathway in our brain. So we look at that trigger and we go, okay, when that trigger happens, what was the thought it created? And how can we look at shifting that thought to something more neutral, also something that will serve you? So with one of my clients, when it was about the flying, like we were able to do the thought work on, okay, what could you think about this flight if you hit turbulence? What could you think instead? Because all of our thoughts are optional. That's where we have power, is in the way we think. And so I encouraged her to practice that thought, not even just when she's on the flight, but anytime she thinks about flying. Or even in the morning, like, you know, we all have different morning routines. I have thoughts that I intentionally think every morning. So I'm not just waiting until the situation happens and then reacting and trusting that the right thought will come. I'm practicing those thoughts every single day. Just like I would go to the gym and work out that muscle, like our brain is this muscle that we need to train and manage and work out so that we can grow that strength, so that when we're in the situation where we do get triggered, the default setting becomes like, I'm safe, I'm okay, this is going to be fine. Initially, I give my clients a lot of coaching on how to replace the thought, but when they kind of understand that skill, then we work a lot more on how to process the emotion that comes first. Because when you're anxious, your brain is in fight or flight, and it's really hard for your brain to switch gears and go like, I'm going to think a positive thought. And that's why like affirmations and all of that, they don't always work for people, is because if you're in fight or flight, your brain is like, I'm not safe. Don't give me something new to work on right now. Like, I don't buy it. There's no space for that right now. So that's where I would do work on like breathing, being aware of your body, narrating to yourself, what does the anxiety feel like? Where is it happening in your body? Reaching out to somebody, telling them that you're anxious, training that person to respond to you, not to like give you all the answers and solve your problem, but just to remind you that you're safe, to remind you that you're not alone. Like I've been very clear with my husband, like when I call you telling you that I'm anxious, please don't fix it. Like just remind me that I'm okay. Remind me that I'm safe. Remind me that my body is strong. And then those things, and like even meditation, that would all fall into the category of how to process and respond to the emotion.
Yeah.
So that we can clear the space to get our brain back into rest and restoration. And that's the space where we can then do the work of switching the thought. So changing the thought isn't the first step, but it's usually the first thing I teach people because it's where they get the most results. And then they're like, oh, this can really work. Like, this is super powerful. And then we still have to deal with all the emotions, right? Because our brain will keep offering us the old thought for potentially 63 days. So we have to figure out how to walk through that, you know, transition. Yeah.
Right. And I think that, you know, when you started off by saying thinking, not dismissing your anxiety or those emotions, but rather understanding that they're that light on your gas tank or that light in your car, rather than it's something bad. It's
right.
Hey, let's deal with this.
Yeah. Like I used to think like anxiety was my enemy. And then I was like, oh, I can't go so far to say anxiety is my friend, but I can say that anxiety has been my teacher.
Okay.
You know, it's helped me pay attention. It's helped me, you know, become more compassionate and kind with myself, to go, there's a reason that I feel this way. And like, it's worth investigating and it's worth looking into, and it's worth taking the time to be gentle with myself and to be kind to myself. And when you mention medication, I never discourage anybody from using medication when they're suffering with anxiety or depression, because that's a kindness that you can show to yourself to get yourself to a baseline where you can start to do this work. And eventually a lot of people will be able to do this work and go off of medication. Some entirely, some taper off. But either way, anything that you're doing that's like a compassionate, kind thing to help yourself, I would encourage, you know. And is it like the total be all end all answer for everybody? No, but it's all, I think it all works together.
This last week when, you know, everything was happening, and I went to the grocery store to get the toilet paper because we were actually out and we actually needed to kind of load up. But, you know, I started grabbing some stuff, but when I walked into the grocery store, and I was saying it was so frantic, and I started to feel feelings again, and I grabbed some stuff and I got to my car, and you know, it was the best thing, because it was already a lot was going on, and my husband had sent me this text, and it just said, "You're doing great, hun. Like, you're doing great." And I just started bawling in my car
Mhm.
because it was exactly what I needed. He wasn't trying
Yeah.
to fix it. He wasn't trying to, like, he didn't have a list of to-dos. It was just like, you're doing great. And
Mhm.
that was like the most powerful thing that, like, it's a text I'll keep forever because it was
Yeah.
the most powerful words that I needed at that moment. And he did it right this time, right? Sometimes they don't get it right. And sometimes they
Yeah.
do. And it was just, he could just, maybe just could tell that I needed just supportive words rather than.
Yeah.
So when you're working with people and you said that you teach them, to find that support, do you talk with the spouse, or do you talk with a friend, or is it just kind of like helping them to explain it to somebody to be a support?
Yeah, I really encourage people to, like, have a safe person and then to, like I said, communicate with that person what they need. Like, sometimes we expect our spouses or our friends to know how to respond to us, but when we're in that fight or flight, like, survival mode state, we can't explain it, and we need them to already know ahead of time what it's gonna be like. So, that's why I say, like, tell your friend, tell your person, "When I call you or when I text you with this, like, this is what would be helpful for me." Um, because then, I mean, the thing is, like, the opposite of anxiety is not, like, being perfectly calm all the time. I think the opposite of anxiety is knowing that you have deep connection with people around you, because I think one of the things that triggers anxiety and exacerbates it and makes it worse is in the moment, usually most people don't have a panic attack when they're with someone they love. They have it when they're alone because they feel alone and they feel isolated and they feel like nobody gets it and nobody understands and nobody else feels this way. So that reaching out for connection decreases the anxiety by, like, at least half for me anyways, just knowing I'm not alone. Just having someone, like, text back or call or whatever and just say, like, "Hey, I'm here with you. We're in this together. It's
Mm.
not gonna always be this way." Like, that is some of the most powerful, like you said, you'll keep that text forever. Like, in that moment, that is so powerful. It's just having that connection, knowing that we're connected.
Mm. Heather, thank you so much. This was very insightful, and it's coming at such a great time as well.
Mm.
If anybody's interested, I'm going to put Heather's contact information at the bottom of this video. And just thank you so much for what you're doing and sharing this and being so open about it and creating a safe space. And it's not shameful, and it's real. And
Mhm.
not, it's not a fixed thing. It's that let's work
Mhm.
through it, process it properly. Appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and thank you for facilitating these conversations because they are more and more needed, and, I think us just talking about it and, like, taking that takes the shame off of it right there, right? It's to just, like, bring it into the light and say, "Hey, this is something that lots of us struggle with, and we're in it together."
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.